been so many places in my lifetime. I've sung a lot of songs.
As I understand it, he invented slap bass as we know it today.
He did.
And I mean, we can't even imagine bass playing today without that.
Yeah.
And then another guy you
You
played
know how,
with that...
you know how that came about?
I do not.
Larry played drums. His mother played organ in the church. And something happened to the drums, and the drums weren't working. So he was compensating for the bass and the snare drum by thumping and snapping the strings. So that was his kick and snare.
Wow.
And that's how that all came about. He told me that.
That is amazing. We heard it here on Piano Whisperer. See, you knew that, but the world definitely didn't know that. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Piano Whisperer. And many thanks, as always, to Classic Pianos for sponsoring this podcast. Today is a very special episode because I'm interviewing someone very special to me personally, who had an enormously positive influence on me in my darker, much younger years. He could have written me off as a waste of time or as a student without potential, but he poured his passion and knowledge for music into me without regard for my low level of abilities at that time. So today, we will be joined by uber talented pianist and keyboardist Vince Evans. Vince has played with so many of the world's greatest musicians. It's impossible to list them all. He is not limited by genre. His artistry encompasses jazz, pop, funk, soul, gospel, blues, and probably many other genres. Some of the most recognizable names he has worked with include Prince, Al Jarreau, George Benson, Bill Withers, Luther Vandross, George Duke, Stanley Turrentine, Lalah Hathaway, Patti LaBelle. There are so many other names that should be recognizable, such as Larry Graham, Lenny White, Roy Ayers, and so many more. So all that said, please welcome Vince Evans. Vince, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, there is so much to talk about, but let's start with how and why you got into music.
Well, that's easy. I'm the baby in a musical family. At the church where my family's always been highly involved in, my mother sang, and she took voice lessons from a guy named Professor Jones, Herbert Jones. He was her voice teacher. He lived down the street from the church. She would go there for voice lessons, and she needed accompanists, so she decided to breed accompanists. So my older brother and my older sister and myself all took piano lessons. My sister was playing Rachmaninoff at the age of 14, and they towed us around to the little tea clubs and stuff like that, and have us perform recitals and stuff like that. And we'd accompany my mom. So that's how I got started.
Yeah, and you mentioned also this compelling story in our conversation earlier about your aunt's retirement home.
Yeah. My aunt May in North Carolina, she had a rest home there right across the street from my mom's house down there. And I'd go over there and spend a lot of time, not much to do in the country in the summertime. And if left alone in a room with them for 10 minutes, I couldn't last. It's nothing. What do we talk about? You're 6, you know? But if there was a piano there before my feet could reach the pedals, if I started playing out Amazing Grace or What a Friend We Have in Jesus or something familiar, I could stay there for hours. And I'd see people start to feed themselves that had just been there in a state of apathy for the longest time. I would see them start to feed themselves or start to laugh or start to cry or reminisce and stuff like that. And I realized, wow, this is some powerful stuff. Yeah. I could actually move these people without touching them or knowing anything about them. And it escapes age boundaries, economical boundaries, any type of wealth that you could have. It doesn't care. It's just a human thing.
Yeah.
So I've always kept that as a core of my playing. You don't always get an opportunity to, but as much as possible, I want to move people when I play. I want to make you move or make you dance or make you laugh or cry or whatever the music calls for.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Musically, in your YouTube interview with Antonio Parker, you mentioned that two of your biggest influences were jazz funk keyboardist Bernard Wright and Donald Blackman. Can you share how they influenced you?
First of all, as people, man, they were so humane. I met Lenny White because he was producing the record for Pieces of a Dream, which was my first recording with a national recording artist. We became friends, and then he would invite me to the studio, and I could kind of see him do work with what was known as the Jamaica Boys, Marcus Miller, Bernard Wright, and Lenny White. You know, I just see them work, see them do their thing. And I remember one day we were in Texas with Pieces of a Dream, and the doorbell rang, and I was rooming with James Lloyd, the other keyboard player, and the guy was coming to visit James, and I almost just passed out because it was Bernard Wright. I was like, "You're Bernard Wright?" He's like, "Yeah, I know. What's up, man? How you doing?" And he was super friendly from the get-go, man. "Hey, man, let's go get a cup of coffee, man. Let's hang out." Very always by the moment. You know, he'd stop in. "I like that hat. Let me buy this hat." I mean, he's a very spur of the moment type of cat and very positive, you know. And I remember he came to the Berkeley Performance Center one time. I played a song for him that I had written a couple years before that. He says, "Man, that's beautiful. I'd like to record that with Buster Williams with the jazz group." And I said, "Yeah, sure, of course." I didn't see him for maybe 6 or 8 years later. He came there with Stanley Jordan, and he played that song note for note like he had just heard it a minute ago. And I'd only played it for him once. I was like totally blown away by that. You know? But I mean, just cats that if they said something, they really, really meant it. And Donald Blackman and Bernard Wright were inseparable. They were like, you know, they were inseparable. And they had their own common language between them, which they let me in on. Some keywords with what album titles really meant and so forth. You know.
So
special
generous.
voices, some special chords and stuff. Don't say, "If you show anybody, I'll come back and kill you."
So let's talk more about some of these, you know, when I say lesser famous, if you're in the music business and you are, you know, out in the world, you know these people because they're iconic, but a lot of people don't have any concept who they are because they may not have had their name on a top 40 hit or something like that. But so let's talk about some of these hugely important people that you played with. And let's start with, like, you already mentioned Lenny White, but for context there, he played drums with Miles Davis, Jaco Pastorius, Chick Corea. The guy was as good as it gets, right? And then there was Lenny Graham, who you played with. He was the front man essentially for Sly and the Family Stone, right? He was the baritone voice, but he also was an amazing bass player. As I understand it, he invented slap bass as we know it today.
He did.
And I mean, we can't even imagine bass playing today without that.
Yeah. You know how that came about?
I do not.
Larry played drums. His mother played organ in the church. And something happened to the drums, and the drums weren't working. So he was compensating for the bass and the snare drum by thumping and snapping the strings. So that was his kick and snare.
Wow.
And that's how that all came about. He told me that.
That is amazing. We heard it here on Piano Whisperer. See, you knew that, but the world definitely didn't know that. I think we take it all for granted, but that must have come about is that in the 70s when that kind of came about?
Yeah, early 70s.
Early 70s.
Very early 70s.
That's what I'm saying. There's all these people who really changed the trajectory of modern music history in these contexts, and nobody really knows that. And so that's one of the reasons I'm so glad to have you on, because you're such a wealth of information. And then there's Roy Ayers too, who's like one of these great vibraphonists, and people may not know who he is, but he really took the vibraphone into the mainstream and made it so much more accessible. But these are guys that you all played with, right?
Yes, this was smooth jazz before it was called smooth jazz.
Yeah.
Before it was fusion or anything. He was just taking ideas because he came from the world. He bridged the world of Lionel Hampton.
Yeah.
You know,
Didn't Lionel Hampton give him his first mallets or something like that?
He certainly did. He certainly did. And he got that bug. Man, I wish I could play you some of the rehearsal tapes from New York, man. Just swinging. Stuff that he might not have ever recorded that we just did off the cuff in rehearsal, just having fun. Those are the real moments, man, where they can't really play, because you're not trying to make something that's commercial. You're not trying to not play too much. Or you're not trying to, you know, you're not trying anything. You're just being in those moments, because, you know, it's a rehearsal. We're just having fun. That's when a lot of magic happens.
But it was so much more cool than smooth jazz as we know it today, right? Because there was such a vibe about that. It was so accessible, and no one thought of it as elevator music. It was so musical, and so there was such a good feeling about it. It caused you to enter in. Like, I think of like smooth jazz today as something that's in the background, but smooth jazz at that time was something that was more engaging. It brought you in. And I think that's a big difference in how it was in those days versus how it's become.
Yeah, it's become really watered down. And I
Right.
think that a lot of the younger people don't have the ears to hear the nuances, so a lot of the language gets lost.
Yeah.
For instance, if you want to play Reasons, any smooth jazz artist, you're going to hear this. You're going to get those two chords,
Yeah.
which is fine, but that's not what Earth, Wind and Fire did. You're missing that.
Oh, yeah.
And why would you? How could you know that and not play it?
Right.
So these guys just don't
Yeah.
know it. So a lot of things get lost. Or say Earth, Wind, and Fire, get something like this. Or they might go chromatic. They're not going to take the time to figure out what was really there.
So
You're
pretty.
losing all that richness.
Yeah.
And to a lot of people's ears, yeah, maybe they sound the same, and it's not that important. But not to mine, man. It's like you're taking the cheese out of a cheeseburger.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
So how do you feel playing with people who have had such an impact on modern music history?
It's indescribable, man. I really can't tell you the joy. Sometimes it's a little limiting. Like some artists are afraid to. You can see they don't want you to speak or do anything. They feel that they have to be the ones that play the hippest stuff, and they haven't grown in 40 years, and they play the same stuff. So they want to keep you from playing, basically. Or they don't encourage you to really play. In those situations, I just play whatever is necessary for the situation. I never overstep my bounds, but it's certainly not as fun to
Right.
just.
That's interesting. There is a lot of pressure on those guys to play it like the famous recording, right? And they probably don't want to deviate from that just because people don't necessarily want to stretch. They want to kind of go there and hear what they want to hear. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's unfortunate for sure because it's not an artistic experience. But
Well, there's another side of that. I mean, when you speak to that, I was disappointed in a lot of artists that did want to change the songs, the mainstay songs they were known for. Because you're on the cruise. These are a lot of people's last cruise. These are a lot of people. They built their life savings to save up $5,000-$10,000 to be on a cruise, and they want to hear you sing the song the way they know it. It's on the record, and they don't want to hear your reggae version of it because you're bored doing it the way it goes. You know, that's unfair, and that's totally into yourself. You know, as a musician, I'm in the service industry. I'm at your service. I can play whatever I want at home here. But when I step out to perform for someone, I'm in service. I please myself many times, but I'm not there for that. I'm not there to please myself. I'm there to please you.
that is the most empathetic statement. I mean, I know that's true. That is true. I just don't hear that very often. And
Yeah.
I can just feel your authenticity with that. And that's one of the reasons I love you so much, man. It's so special. And so you're always moved by these positive experiences. And in our phone conversation, you mentioned you had great experiences with Bill Withers and Eddie Murphy.
Oh,
You want to talk
absolutely.
about why you like those guys so much?
The same reason of Roy Ayers and those guys. The people I gravitate towards, Roy Ayers, Larry Graham, Eddie Murphy, these guys are humans, good humans, man, that make you feel good to be around them and welcoming. If you're a part of their organization, a part of their thing, it's really a family vibe, you know. It's really a family vibe, and I got invited to a lot of cookouts or whatever the thing was. If he had concert tickets to something, we went as a band. We went shopping. We went as a band. And that's how Sly and the Family Stone were, you know. They all went and got dogs. They all went and got Cadillacs or whatever it is that they did. They did it as a band, as a unit. And a lot of that is missing. And it feels so good to be a part of that, you know.
It's cool.
Yeah.
And, you know, so after being on the road and so forth and playing with so many people already, in your own quest to continue your constant mission to, as in your own words, get better as an artist, you visited with jazz giant Barry Harris weekly for a couple of years.
Yeah,
And
decade.
A decade. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned in your interview with Antonio Parker, and this is why I got a couple, that you learned more in 1 to 2 years with Barry Harris than you learned in the previous 40. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. But I also, before we do, because I think context is so important here, I want to let people know who Barry Harris was if they don't already. And this is going to be a skeletal thing, but he played with Miles Davis, Cannonball Adderley, Dexter Gordon, Coleman Hawkins, even lived with Thelonious Monk in the 70s. And that is just such a stripped down, minuscule version of all that he did. But he, in other words, he was one of the greats. He influenced like guys like trumpeter Donald Byrd. I mean, he was a truly great musician who was standing with the best, playing with the best, and the best considered him an equal. So he was a truly remarkable artist. And given all your own vast experiences before meeting Barry, Vince, including you graduated from Berklee College of Music with a degree in music production and engineering. So what did Barry teach you that you hadn't already learned?
Well, I found him by accidentally because I had Netflix. And I saw a documentary or something, and I was like, oh, snap, I didn't know Netflix has documentaries. So I Googled jazz documentary, and a talk that he gave at NYU came up. And I was 3/4 through writing a book called Universal Music Theory at that time that I had been working on for several years. And I'd always kept studying. But the things he talked about in that video are things I never heard before. He started talking about the 2 6s. What are the 2 6s? Are the 2 6s are the 2 whole tone scales. These are the 6 that ain't those. And this is what's the man and woman of music, and what happens when they get together. When they have 3 kids. What are the 3 kids? The 3 diminished 7 chords. How are they kids? Because they share the DNA. They share 2 notes from this whole tone scale and 2 notes from that whole tone scale. And every time you play this chord, you better know you're playing a child of those 2 parents. All that kind of stuff was totally foreign to what Berklee was talking. But then if you hear any Berklee professor play the piano or compose a song, you know, I'd much rather listen to the things that Barry was able to create and improvise and do than the things my teachers could do. So I knew the path right off. I was like, man, I need to know about this. I really need to know about this. And a lot of his things were really off the cuff, and a lot of people don't want to believe that that's the truth, that this is the thing, you know, but it changed my playing forever. I had to completely reinvent myself after meeting Barry.
And could you talk about a little bit, what did that look like? And I know this is a spontaneous question, but reinventing yourself, how did that manifest?
Well, one of the ways was in my technique. You know, I came up as a piano player. You know, Hannon and Cherney exercises. This was the paradigm. This was the way that you played and the way that you crossed over. And to replace that with a technique that did this, that totally left because Barry went to a famous Russian classical cat that he was referred to. And he went to him and he says, he asked him, he said, well, Barry, what have you been doing lately? He said, oh, you know, I've been exercising my fingers and all of that. And he said, well, you might not want to take from me, because he says, why? He says, because you don't play piano with your fingers. He said, you don't play piano with your fingers? He says, no. They're like a marionette, like a puppet, and the strings are being pulled back here. And these are just placeholders. That changed my whole philosophy. And I began to come up with my own exercises and things that put all these things together and gained me technique that way past what I could do before.
Are you talking about like weight and balance and all those kinds of things?
Yes, weight, balance, you know, turning wrist rotation as opposed to finger movements, the position of the hand, always keeping the wrist behind the fingers, never allowing myself to get into a position like this. My technique wasn't bad. It was par.
I remember.
It
was good.
yeah, it was par. But if you see me play now, it's like it's completely different from before in terms of ease, you know.
Now, another thing we talked about was the 7 versus the 8 note scale, the extra note. Do you think we should talk about that here?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay.
I mean, the whole idea that music is 2 modes, resting and motion. And you land on something that's tonic. A complete tonic chord, if you could agree with me, that the complete tonic chord is a 6 chord. And if you listen to any old 20s recordings, whether it's the Little Rascals or Happy Birthday or He's a Jolly Good Fella, that's what you're going to get. That's what you're going to get. You're not going to get this sound.
Right, no 7.
So every major 7 chord is a sound with a note 1 to go home. It could have been this one, or this one, or these 2. They move. But the idea that there are tonic notes that want to be resolved, and then there are, some people call them passing tones and all that, but they're borrowed notes from the other side, from the dominant side. And if you look at Barry's system of this being 12 notes, dividing how many ways you can divide the octave evenly. You can divide it into 2 6s. Half of those are 2 augmented chords. So you get 4 augmented chords. But then these diminished 7 groups, they call them diminished 7, but they should be called super dominant or quadruple dominant because they're where the dominant chords come from. So if you look at these 3 groups, here's 4, here's 8, here's 12. If I go up again, I've got the first 4 again. So I only have 3 groups of notes. Let's call this group 1, 2, and 3. Well, you look at your C6 chord and look at your group 1. I wouldn't complement this chord with notes from this chord because it's made of that. Barry would say that's incest. The C and the A, the 2 outside notes come from the first group. Look at the second group. The 2 inside notes come from the second group. So the chord itself is composed of notes from these 2 groups. But what about that third group? It is not there. So just like you write with a yellow piece of chalk on a blackboard or a black piece of chalk on a white piece of paper or whatever, you take these things and you snap them between those things. That's the way you make a major scale. And now your scale is even. This and that and this and that and this. And you have 8 eighth notes for a bar. It's perfect.
That, right? 7 eighth notes is always a struggle. Now, so there are a lot of people that are going to be listening that can't see that. So do you want to walk them through the intervals like 1, 2, 3, 4 so that they know what you're playing there? Sure.
So in a C major triad, C, E, and G, when you add the 6th degree, that's C6 chord. That's tonic in the key of C. And what's always dominant is a diminished 7 chord on the leading tone, meaning a half step below this tonic. So that would be B. You go up 3 notes, you get D. Go up 3 notes, you get F. Go up 3 notes, you get A flat. Or you can do it my way. Just take the C6 that you have, C, E, G, and A. Move everybody down a half step to B, D sharp, F sharp, and G sharp. And then just move the 2 center notes down a half step. And you'll end up with a diminished chord. That resulting chord will be the chord that goes between the C6. So now you have a scale of chords. And contrary to what we've been taught, that a scale consisting of 1 major 7, 2 minor 7, 3 minor 7, 4 major 7, 5 7, 6 minor 7, 7 half diminished, all those chords, it's not. It's 2 things. It's C6, B diminished, C6, B diminished, C6, B diminished, C6, B diminished, C6. So you end up with a lot of music that, if something like this, for instance. Yeah, it's pretty, it's all right, but it'll never be this. and you could never get that song. There's that extra note there. You wouldn't have a plagal cadence, wouldn't have four minor. You wouldn't have Billy Joel.
Right.
So many things. It's in the music. And so we end up with more chords, more crayons than the other players that just learn the red, blue, and greens and yellows. We have mauve and indigo and brick red and crimson red and blood red and all these things.
Right on. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, I think a lot of, it sounds when you're playing, I'm hearing what I associate with gospel. And I think a lot of, not a lot, but some really fine musicians who have great ears played some of these things intuitively. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, in terms of the 8-note scale, we didn't cover just a recap of that so you can walk people through the interval of what the 8-note scale. You went through the chords and how it's built, but if you're just going to practice the 8-note scale, you're going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Sharp 5.
Yeah, sharp
6, 7,
5. And now what was 6 is going to be 7. What was 7 is going to be 8 and so
Yeah.
forth. Now you can't call it an octave because it's 9 notes.
Yeah, that's
Causes
right.
all kinds of problems.
That's true. All right.
Yeah,
So,
and then if a minor variant, you do the same thing except just lower the third. So you have C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, A, B, and C.
nice. Thanks. Okay. So now you have for a long time had a weekly Wednesday workshop. Is that still happening?
Yes, absolutely.
And is this
Absolutely.
an online thing or is this an in-person thing?
It's both. People
is
come
both.
here in person, and I'm also online at the same time.
And can people sign up for that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
They can send me a text at my number 301-412-2303 or my email magickeys@me.com and just say they're interested, and I'll send out the information.
That is really amazing that you're willing to supply that here. They will learn from you things that they have not learned from anyone else. And that's just really great. So, Vince, again, citing your interview with Antonio Parker, and I would encourage folks to check that out. It's in 2 segments. It's a part 1 and part 2, and I think it's called Conversations in Jazz with Antonio Parker. You can find it on YouTube. And he and Vince have obviously a lot of history, but it's a really wonderful conversation. But he asked you if you had a life phrase or something to that extent, and you took a long time to think about that. And you said, rather than making a living, you want to live a making. And that took a little bit of a while to steep in or to sink into my thought process. But I thought, wow, that's really pretty profound.
That's my mantra.
So you didn't just make that up on the fly. That was something that.
No, I did make it up on the fly at that moment, but
you did.
It's become my mantra. Yeah.
So you knew when you said that was pretty heavy.
I was
right?
like, man, yeah. I mean, that's exactly what we all do if we're lucky.
Yeah.
And if we're in that mindset, different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to become anything different.
Yeah.
They get one thing and they're very patterned. Give me this pattern and I'll live out my days in that pattern. I want to see something different, see something new. I want to grow. I want to be a different player than I was 6 months ago. Not to say I can't play that way. I can still do those things. Yeah. But it's a choice.
Well, I caught that. Just want to say that statement was not lost on me. And so another thing that you guys discussed, though, you and Antonio, that I thought was interesting was the sheer breadth of stars with whom you've either performed or recorded, because there really have been countless. And essentially, he asked you why you chose not to be famous. And I know that there are a lot of things that can happen to affect that, but you really kind of did make a deliberate choice, it seems, in some respects, not to go a particular path. Can you talk about that? Are you comfortable talking about that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for one, I'm very family oriented, I guess being the baby in the family. And my sisters and brothers and my parents were here, and I didn't want to move to New York or LA and come and visit them. I want to be here with my people on. So if I have to make less money to do that or whatever, so what? I get to have more fun. These are the people I have fun with.
Yeah.
And even still, this house that I'm in now is just 3 doors down from my parents' house where they were. And I could always just check on them or, come pick my father up when he fell or whatever, get them out of the garage, whatever you need to do. These are the things that I've always been family values, you know. That's the main thing. And I saw some things that made me feel uncomfortable, you know, not to the extent of a P. Diddy party or anything, but,
Sure.
you know, I've been to Eddie Murphy's house and you got to go through security. I don't like to be any place where I have to be let out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where I'm not free to leave till somebody tells me I can leave, whether it's somebody's house or estate or the vice president's house or whatever. That makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to be that big. Yeah. You know, and I don't want to be so big where I have to look out that someone may be trying to poison me or my family or kidnap because I got all this money and hold money over me, stuff like that. You know, it's like, yeah, it's all right. I'd rather be under the radar.
Yeah. Still, I think your reasons are so genuine and pretty
I mean,
cool.
I live the life of a king. I got 15 pinball machines in my basement. The 16th one on the way, you know? And a lot of that was inspired.
Did you have 16 go down to 15 and now you're going back up to 16?
No, I actually had more. I had 21 at one point.
Okay.
I sold some and I moved some around to make space.
Yeah.
One of my friends that I worked on one of his machines, I traded him that machine that I worked on for. I said, well, listen, I'll take this one and you pick any three of this. And that gave me more space and it gave him machines and I get to keep them in the family. So if I want to buy them back later or move them around or trade them around, I still have them.
Yeah.
You know,
pinball is a whole other conversation, but
yeah. But I got a new, the 16th one is a new one that's about to drop in the next, 3 or 4 weeks. It's a brand new machine.
Let's go pinball then for just a moment. So what's so special about that one?
Man, like you said, living in the moment. You know, pinball, if you just want to kill some time, try not to lose the ball and have fun, you can do that. And don't give a damn about the score. Or if you say, well, if I shoot this shot and then this one and then this one and then this one 3 times in a row, then I can do this and make plans, and then you can play that way too. You can play competitively. Then I know how to exploit the machine for its points. But the real fun of it is it's man versus machine, man. Just knowing just how much I can nudge this thing and what I can get away with and what I can't.
Okay.
And playing that game, taking things to that edge. Whereas I'm not losing this ball, sucker, and the machine's like, yes, you are. I'm like, no, I'm not. Watching some great players just be so cool and composed. My friend Justin Bath, man, he plays like he's washing dishes, man. It's like you don't even see his hands move, man, but he's in complete control all the time. To the layperson, it just seems that this guy's just really lucky. He's not doing anything at all, but he happens to not lose the ball.
It sounds a lot like music to me, improvisation.
Absolutely. Because, unlike a video game, which you figure out the algorithm, okay, you do this, jump over this twice, kill this guy, da-da-da. You've played the game, you know how it goes. That same pinball machine will show you something that you haven't seen in 10 years, and it'll tickle you. Be like, wow, I never saw this before, And music is that way, too. It's just infinite possibilities, man.
Yeah. So when we chatted on the phone, I asked you for some of your most meaningful experiences, and you mentioned a specific time when you played live with Lalah Hathaway on her song, A Song for You. Actually, it's her dad's song, right? It was her dad's song with some special people in the audience. Would you like to share that story with our listeners?
Yeah. I felt good because my two biggest heroes in my life have always been my father and my brother. And my brother taught me how to learn, pretty much. Whatever he was into, whether it was juggling or whatever he got into, in 2 weeks, he knew everything there was to know on the subject. He got every magazine, this is pre-internet. He knew how to study and how to learn something thoroughly and know it through and through. So I got a lot of that from him. And it just gave me great joy to bring him on the cruise as a guest, to see me in my world and to see his little brother amongst the Jonathan Butlers and George Dukes and these kind of people. It held in high esteem. And he was seated a few rows back with George Duke on one side and Layla's mom on the other side. And she called the song in the concert that we had never rehearsed, never discussed doing it. She just said, hey, can we do a song for you? I was like, yeah, we can do a song for you. And this was right at the period when I was studying with Barry and learning these other different chords and harmonies that I wouldn't have put under any singer but Layla, knowing that she could hear it. And I played a few of those chords, and they got some reactions from Mr. Duke. And he stood up at one point and gave me that finger, like, ah, there it is, there it is. And my brother got to see that, you know. And so that was really a powerful moment for me.
How special.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. And that was at the Capitol Cruises? Is
Capitol
that what that
Jazz,
was?
yeah, Capitol Jazz Cruise. I did those for like 13 years straight, man.
So what is next for Vince Evans?
You know what? I've not yet recorded a project. I've done some projects just to have something on CD, you know, to sell at gigs, you know, to fit a means. But to state something and make a statement, this or next year might be the year for that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to that. You know,
So that's one thing.
yeah. Is there another thing?
I just want to grow as a player and as a writer and be able to do bigger jobs. I want to be the first. I want to do music for pinball machines. You know, and I got real close on being able to do it for The Godfather, but it didn't pan out. But I'm hoping that at some point this will turn into a way to create music under glass for a world under glass, you know. Being able to use all of my skills in one fell swoop rather than just the engineering side over here for these artists and just the playing side to accompany these things and then just the composing thing because they need this, you know, to put something together where I really just take the time out. But I'm probably going to have to I don't know how I'm going to make that happen, man, because I'm too busy doing work for other people. I'm just going to have to not work for anyone else for 6 months or something. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But
Yeah,
it's something I want to do.
yeah. I would love you to record too, because your music is so authentic and you know, it was so funny because in preparing for this, you played with so many great players yourself and you play at such a high level, but there was very little online that I could access about you, you know? And so, I mean, on the other hand, I was very thankful I could call you. We could talk through some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I would love for you to be able to share some of your own personal music with the world. That would be fabulous.
Yeah. It's coming. It's coming. I don't know when, but it's coming.
Well, you're such a wealth of knowledge, Vince. Is there any wisdom you'd like to offer to up and coming musicians?
Mm. Try to put yourself in positions where you can grow and realize that when you get a gig or something, stay working. You don't have to be. I had a teacher tell me once I was trying to go do too much, and they said, you don't have to be fabulous. You just have to be decent, and then you grow on them. And so put yourself in situations where you can learn something and grow it, grow your craft. We're in a time when a lot of people don't, that concept, those 3 words, grow your craft, just don't even exist, you know? Why? There's AI. I can just chat GP this or whatever it is, whatever they call it, and put something together. Yeah, but that's artificial. Somebody asked me the other day, I was explaining, I have a degree in music production. And this is a person that was playing tracks for me, and I was telling him things about the tracks. And he said, yeah, but did you ever experiment with the AI? You mean artificial intelligence in place of my intelligence? That I studied and learned and know what a compression ratio is and what a threshold is and what it does to sound. You mean replace that with push a button and see what a computer comes up with? It's you know, I don't judge. That's what people like. Have at it, but I like analog stuff, man.
Yeah.
I like things that are crafted. That's why I like to cook so much, fly kites and do stuff that's just, cornhole, man. You got to practice to do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, cooking's a whole.
So,
That's a
I
whole
like
other
things that
thing.
take time. I like things that take time. And they don't have to be complicated, but I like stuff that takes time. And appreciating the time and craftsmanship in a thing when you look at it. I really like that.
Yeah. Now, is there any way for people to follow you and all that you're doing? I know your website's not up right now, but it will be the same domain once it is up again, right?
Yeah, I do still have the domain.
Okay. So people can watch is it vinceevans.com?
Yeah, vinceevans.com. And on Instagram, I think I'm Tickle Them Good.
Oh, you are? Okay. All right.
Which
All
I
right.
hardly ever access that, but I might in the future.
All right. Well, they're just going to have to wait for Vince Evans, and it'll be worth the wait. And so as we go out today, with your blessing, I'm going to play the actual live performance that you sent to me of a song for you. Is
Oh
that
yeah, that'd be great.
which we discussed?
I'd like to hear
And
that
it's
myself.
not a studio recording, so there is some background noise, but it's a wonderful recording and well worth the listen. So we're going to go out with that. And Vince, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been an incredible blessing to reconnect with you after all these years.
Man,
I
blessing
wish you
was
an
for me too.
entirely meaningful continuation of your journey. It's so cool to be talking to you again.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you.
And listeners, thank you also very much for taking the time to watch. I'm grateful for you, and you're what makes this worthwhile. If you've enjoyed Piano Whisperer, I would be deeply grateful if you would take the time to rate the show on whatever platform you use. It makes a huge difference to us. And of course, many sincere thanks again to Classic Pianos for making these episodes possible. And we will see you all again very soon. Take care.
I've been so many places in my lifetime. I've sung a lot of songs. I've made some bad rides. I've acted out my life in stages with 10,000 people watching. We're alone now, and I'm singing this song to you. I know your image of me is what I hope to be. I treated you unkindly, darling, can't you see? There's no one more important to me. Baby, can't you see through me? We're alone now, and I'm singing a song to you. You taught me precious secrets of a true love, withholding nothing. You came out in front when I was hiding. Now I'm so much better. If our words don't come together, together. We were alone, and I was singing this song to you. We were alone, and I was singing this song to you. We were alone, and I was singing this song. Singing this song to you. Let's have this. Thank you.